Hi, everybody. Dr. Erin Patterson here with the ADHD Queens podcast. And today we have our very first guest. We are talking about couples and how ADHD can just wreck shit. This is Faith Dulin. Faith Dulin is a licensed marriage and family therapist in Charlotte, North Carolina, helping couples and individuals improve their relationships through increased self-awareness, improved communication, and effective conflict management. I have invited her to the ADHD Queens podcast to explore the intersection of ADHD and romantic relationships. I'm so excited. Self-identified as neuro-boring, but we still love her. Remember, non-queens welcome too. Neuro-boring, I don't know that I love that, but we'll say neuro-bland.
That's worse.
Spicy. Self-identified as neuro-boring, she's excited to learn more about neuro-sparkly folks as we discuss how to understand, support, and appreciate our relationships with them. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have you and so excited to explore this topic. Okay, so months ago, I posed a question to people who were surrounding me about what are things that you would like us to talk about on the ADHD Queens podcast. And couples was one of the things that came up. How do I get my spouse to understand what ADHD is? Or also the sorts of conflicts that are happening in relationships because ADHD is present in either one or both partners. And so I am curious for you in your work, since you are really kind of focused in on helping couples with interactions and conflict management and all of that stuff, what do you notice? I guess maybe what are some flags that go off for you when you go, okay, there is something going on here that is outside of the typical realm. What kinds of stuff do you see?
So what are the sparkly signals maybe?
Sparkle. Flag.
yeah, exactly. I think there's a potential disconnect, right? When one partner has ADHD and another partner doesn't, and they don't understand each other. I mean, we're already battling in heterosexual relationships, men and women, we're already battling different personalities, different perspectives, so many differences. And then you throw in some spicy, sparkly as well. And so it's hard, I think, for the neuro-boring person like myself to be in a relationship and understand the intricacies of how their brain works so much different. They process information faster. They can have different...
Incorrectly also.
They can have different channels on at one time. I'm a one channel only in my brain. I can only listen to one. And so I think it's really interesting to try to understand each other and be able to talk about those differences with open curiosity. And that helps kind of combat the frustration.
Yes. There is lots of frustration, I think, on both sides of the coin here, seeing people who I work with who have ADHD and their frustration, with their partner not understanding that I can't just get up and go do the dishes because the dishes need to be done. A lot of people struggle with that. It's not just ADHD, people with anxiety and depression also struggle with getting things done. But the frustration on the ADHD partner side of looking at how is the ADHD impacting things that are then impacting the household, and then the frustration on the non-ADHD partner side about, a lot of the things that I've heard about that is non-ADHD partners getting frustrated with their ADHD partner not finding them attractive or exciting anymore, right? It's a lot of times the ADHD can be whoa, I'm so into this thing. I'm hyper fixated. I'm hyper focused. And it can show up in a person, in a relationship. And then that sparkly new wears off. And then the non-ADHD partner is left don't you like me anymore? What happened? And they're, wood burning or making some craft or whatever they're doing.
That's such an excellent point you make, really, because I think this joke we kind of talk about, right, is an ADHD person is squirrel, and then their focus is pulled in different directions so quickly. And that can play out in the romantic relationship where the non-person kind of wonders, am I not the new shiny object anymore? Are you getting bored with our relationship? And I think that it's all how you look at these differences, and how you approach them as a team, and be curious about each other and accept and celebrate the differences instead of allowing them to build in with the frustrations. So I think that's an opportunity to keep the relationship fresh. Like, implement those things that I would tell any couple to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keep it exciting, keep it new, have novelty in the relationship, change up the routine so you can still have sparkly with the same partner long term.
Speaking of excitement, we should talk about how ADHD impacts sex and relationships, because that's a big one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you've got an ADHD person who is, it's the end of the day and their brain is not there. They're not present in the moment. They're thinking about paying bills or whatever, and it really is like, can be disconnecting. I have so many women in particular who really struggle to like shut their mind off and be present during sex, and just like, hey, let's have a good time and be in the present moment. But they're like paying bills and washing dishes, and I've got to do this and I got to do that. Then, the guys are getting frustrated, like, why is she just not into it? But so for me, as a therapist working with the individual, that's where like mindfulness practice comes in. Like, you have to retrain your brain to not be distracted during certain moments. That is a big one. But also, how can we bring that into other parts of the day too, right? Like quality time, not just sexy time. But I think that's a big thing. Like, do you hear couples talk about that being impacted?
Oh, yeah. I think that's a great point as well. I think, if, for your example, if the female, and a lot of women, right, we carry the cognitive load of running the household and managing a lot of the softer skill tasks that need to be done. And so they can often become overwhelmed and overstimulated. And then when they're trying to connect with their partner physically, their mind is in a bunch of different places. Then you have ADHD in that as well. And even if they're in the moment at a certain point in time and they're really enjoying themselves, they can become distracted. Their mind can drift away from being in their body, in the moment with their partner. And it can feel awful for that partner because they're like, are you with me? Are you here with me? Did you go away?
Right. Like, and then the dog barks, or the washing machine starts making a sound, or the fan is too loud, or, whatever. They get distracted from being in the present physical moment with their partner. And now they're like hyper focused on a sound in the room or whatever.
And that's such powerful information to have for someone that doesn't have this, because they don't have that same point of reference that you're describing. For them, they're more so in the moment, really focused on their partner. And when they see their partner kind of go somewhere else, they can take it personally. Like, am I not doing this well enough? Am I not doing something that you like? Are you not into this? Do you not like me? Are you not attracted to me anymore? And so they can really kind of take that personally.
And then they have their own spiral.
Right. And it can be a nice sparkly cluster.
Yeah. With no. Yeah. And then that creates, I think like hard feelings and conflict too of, then they start to disengage, right? One of them, maybe the ADHD one, is too busy doing things and can't make time. And so many people get so like many negative feelings about scheduling sexy time or planning for sexy time. Like, it's okay. Would you say it's okay to like make sure we've had a bath and the dog is fed and like I've done all of the things to shut the house down so that I can like concentrate and be in the moment?
Yeah, and I want to hear more about your perspective on this as well, because I think you're right. I think being intentional about prioritizing the sexual connection in the relationship is super important. And I think doing what needs to be done to create a hospitable environment for romance is really smart. When you just describe sort of that intentionality and setting up the scenario for that, once someone with ADHD is there, what can keep them kind of there? Because will they get distracted pretty quickly when something else happens, even though they've done a good job of the setup?
All of the things. Yeah. And so I think it is important for, the non-ADHD partner to recognize that the ADHD partner is going to need to do work sometimes to stay present in the moment. And so, and to be a little bit flexible, if it's too hot, you need to be able to say it's too hot, turn the fan on. If there's a weird noise, if the dog needs to be checked on, or the cat needs to be thrown out of the room, or whatever the thing is, like, communicate that, take a breath, come back to the present moment, and when we're talking about mindfulness in general, if you're talking about mindful eating, right, you're gonna, ooh, our producer brought us snacks. There's a whole plate of snacks here. Y'all don't even know. I'm just gonna show you some cheese. So if you're mindfully eating the cheese, you're gonna smell the cheese. What does the cheese taste like? Then I'm gonna take a bite of the cheese, and I'm gonna notice the texture in my mouth and the flavor in my mouth, and I just cannot eat the cheese. And you notice all of the things. So when you're practicing mindfulness, it really is about focusing on what sensations are happening. And so you can bring that practice into the bedroom too. I am feeling my partner's temperature of their skin. I am, the fan is on. I am hearing the fan, but I am focusing on what my sensations are experiencing. And that can help bring them back. I probably should have finished the cheese before I talked, but whatever. And then, like I mentioned, also about the communication. If something is bugging you and you're hyperfixating on it, go ahead and say, I need this to be fixed.
Yeah.
Because if the fan is making some clicking sound or something like that, that's all you're going to be able to focus on. And so we need to pause, resolve the problem, come back to the present moment.
I think that's so helpful to understand, because I think as a neuro-boring person, I'm so focused on whatever I'm doing in the moment that everything else fades away. So I don't even hear the fan. Yeah. So I think if I was intimate and my partner was like, "What's that noise?" I'd be like, "What noise?"
Right.
Because I'm all in the moment and not easily distracted. And it's kind of frustrating for me, actually. It kind of pulls me out of the moment. For me, I don't know if you're like this, but like when I watch a movie, like if someone pauses the movie, it's like,
oh God,
they've pulled you out of the moment.
I paused the movie. My poor husband, he even said this week, I don't think in 20 years we have watched a movie or a show where you have not paused it to say something.
Yeah.
I can't help it.
Yeah. So I love what you're saying, because I think it's so incredible to understand that it's different for different people. And I think we obviously have our own like frame of reference and perspective that we perceive things through. And so not taking it personally, being able to communicate, like you said, where you're at, how you're feeling for the ADHD partner and the non-ADHD partner. Like, hey, I feel like, are you distracted? Should I do something different? Should we change positions? Like, what would help? Is there anything else you could think of that would help the non-ADHD?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important for the ADHD person to also recognize, like what you're saying, that those interruptions also pull the non-ADHD partner out of the moment. So the non-ADHD partner needs to be able to also come back to a present, state of mindfulness, right? Attend to the thing and then come back. And really, that's what meditation is. It's bringing your awareness back to the present moment, and so to be able to take care of the thing, but not get into your own thought spiral about what this means.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything except, in last episode, we talked about the corpus striatum in the brain. It has the inability to just bring in one or two pieces of information in the ADHD brain. It's bringing in 5 or 6 things all at the same time. And so they may be having a very good time and the fan is bothering them. But because the fan then moves to the top of the list, even though it's not the priority, then they're not going to be able to enjoy the time the way that everybody wants to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's part of the trick, is to be able to communicate the thing, deal with the thing, and everybody take a breath and come back to the present moment without assigning any meaning to it as anything other than...
Yeah, so powerful. Absolutely. Because there's the neutral data of what's happening, and then there's the meaning that we attribute to these events. And especially if we take it personally, if someone's kind of drifting away in their mind. And that's just the way that they operate. And we operate in a different way. And neither of those ways are bad or worse or whatever. It's just we're different people. So how do we navigate that and still connect? Mm-hmm. Is there a point, do you think, to intentional distractions? As I was listening to you, I was wondering, like, if there's like candles in the room or there's like some sensual music going on, like, the noise of the fan, right? But
Mhm.
would like music help as far as
Yeah.
override some of those other like distractions that tend to occur?
Yes, I think that knowing what can be useful for you, and each person is going to be different, right? And so for some people, a fan and music will create the ambient sound that will help them be able to put the rest of the household out of their mind. And so it will be okay. I want the fan on. I want it, oscillating or blowing, directly on us, or I need this music playing in the background. Also for women that, and this is like not ADHD necessarily related, but women need to be thinking about sex for a lot longer period than men do. And so, guys, if you haven't made any kind of like emotional contribution earlier in the day to kind of set the mood for later, then she's not necessarily going to be ready to go when the kids are in the bed and it's time to do all of the things. And so that can also be a problem when the ADHD spouse is, the male in the instance, right? That they may have the thought of, I want to kind of make some kind of emotional contribution to our intimacy, which may or may not result in coitus later. But if the thought slips out of their mind and they don't, say the flirty thing or, compliment or whatever the thing is, right, then okay, maybe the woman's just not thinking about it. I mean, some women think about it, but most of the women that I'm running into are thinking about the management of the household, the management of the kids, the management of whatever they're doing at work or whatever.
So that general idea that I hear separate from ADHD, it's like if you want your spouse to be turned on, specifically your wife, right? Go do the dishes. So maybe helping out with some things to take off of her plate, or is it just
Yes.
like there's always going to be something filling that empty
Yeah.
space now on the plate?
Mhm. Well, probably a little of both.
Yeah.
I remember it was a couple of weeks ago. I don't know who I was talking to. Was I talking to you? I don't know who I was talking to. I feel like it was a young person though. And they said,
So it
"Do
was
you
me.
think do you think blah 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 is sexy?" And I like when a man does blah 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 is sexy. And I said, "No, I think." Oh, what did I say? Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes. Okay. So my producer and I hang out behind the scenes off the, and so we were at the golf course and what you asked me, do you think it's sexy when a man steers? Yes, when a man turns the steering wheel like this. And I said something along the lines of, no, I think it's sexy when a man throws his trash in the trash can or something like that. Like, you know, the evidence that we've been together for a long time and that sexy stuff, is a little bit different. Um, but speaking of management of the household, how do kids come into the picture when you've got a partner with ADHD? Speaking of kids, it's time for Ruby's appearance. Ruby is having some girl problems. She says, I don't want to come to work today. She said, I didn't want to come to work today, but they made me do it. So, how does managing kids and ADHD intersect in couples?
Yeah, I think it probably amplifies the dynamic that's already occurring when it's just the adults in the relationship. So, division of labor, parenting approaches, different perspectives, different points of reference.
So, when you've got an ADHD partner and a non ADHD partner in a couple unit together, what are maybe some of the complaints that you hear about from the non ADHD partner about the ADHD partner with the kids?
With regards to parenting.
Yeah, parenting or household management or anything, I guess.
I've heard some horror stories about ADHD parents forgetting the kid in the driveway in the stroller
God.
and things like that. And I think that really stresses out the non-ADHD partner because they're like, how could you do that? Like they talk about points where we don't have frame of reference for that. It's just like, oh my God. And our child's life is in danger.
Mm-hmm.
you're negligent, like that can go sideways really fast. And I don't know how much of that can be managed and avoided per se. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, because you don't want to say, oh, well, your brain doesn't work the right way, and so you're not fit to parent. Like, you've got to figure out ways that you can help with the parenting in a way that works for everybody, you know? And so I think that this would just be like any other thing that we're trying to hack, right? If I'm trying to remember to move the laundry from the washer to the dryer before it sours, what am I going to do? What technology can I use? What other reminder trick can I use to make sure that I've done this? And I actually, years and years ago, heard somebody say that um, I have no idea if this was in reference to ADHD or just general the exhaustion of parenting. But I heard somebody say that the dad would take his shoe off and put it in the car seat with the kid, and then if he got to work and didn't have his shoe back on, he knew he didn't take the kid to daycare, and the kid was still in the car.
Okay.
And so it's some visual reminder of you're doing this thing, right? Like I made actually you helped me with the pharmacy spoof. Remember, I have a problem remembering to go to the pharmacy to get my medicine, which helps me remember to go to the pharmacy. And so I have to tell myself out loud, while I'm driving to the pharmacy, go to the pharmacy, go to the pharmacy, go to the pharmacy. So if you're taking the kid to daycare and it's not something that you usually do, that might be where the problem comes in.
Yeah.
If this is something that I'm not typically responsible for,
Right.
then how does that throw my day off? But
Yeah.
if you're taking the kid to daycare and it's not something that you usually do, go to the daycare, go to the daycare, go to the daycare, or put your shoe back there with them so that my kid is in the car, especially, summertime, like, ooh.
I know. And cars, thankfully, now have sensors in the back seats and things like that. We don't want to leave them in the car, but it's true, right? And that's applicable skills that you can use in a variety of situations. And I think even having like reminders on your phone that go off, or, ask Alexa, remind me in 5 minutes, like I have something cooking, because, kids, they can move fast. So the situation changes fast. They like take out into the backyard by the pool and you're like, and you go chasing them. So I imagine trying to manage parenting, small children, and ADHD, distractions, and all of that can be additionally challenging. And for the non-ADHD parent to not be critical, right? And allude to a lack of quality parenting just because their approach is different than theirs.
Okay, so outside of kids, that the ADHD can show up in a different way with like chores, household management. You were supposed to pay the power bill, or you were supposed to, do this thing, or I needed you to go by the store and get eggs, or whatever the thing was, right?
Yeah, this is a big one. I mean, division of labor is a topic that comes up in couples counseling a lot. We're still evolving from traditional gender roles from decades ago, where everyone's role was sort of compartmentalized and you had the domestic care largely under the female in the home. So this comes up a lot. We're still trying to figure out what that looks like in each household, especially with the female partner in a heterosexual relationship working outside the home and then coming home and things aren't done if they're both working and they're both trying to manage the household duties and responsibilities. So I think it's really important for those strategies and hacks, as you called them, to be in place, and to reassure the non-ADHD partner that you're making efforts, and that there are specific challenges, and you're not going to do things the way that they do them. You're not going to execute tasks the way that they do them. This gets really tricky, though, because we have these new things on the horizon in couple dynamics, like weaponized incompetence, right? So it's like, how frustrating when you've asked your partner 52,000 million times to please change the light bulb.
I can't reach it.
And they're like, I forgot. And it's like, at what point, that partner might feel like the ADHD spouse is using that as an excuse. It's not a priority to them. They don't care when they're being asked to help with something. Everything is on them, right? So that gets really sticky.
Yeah. And legitimately, when an ADHD person says that they forgot, they forgot. I mean, I guess there are some jerks out there who use it, to get away with things. But yeah, if I stand up and I'm headed to a room to get something and you observe me stop in the middle of the house, clearly I have lost my way and I don't know what I'm doing or why I stood up. When I say, "Oh, I forgot to do blah, blah, blah for you," I really mean it. Like, you observe me doing it. It's not fake.
Well, it's true. And also, it's not always going to make sense to you if you're the non-ADHD spouse because, you might look at it like, well, you did remember to like play video games all night, or you did remember to, call your friends and go golfing. So, but you can't remember the light bulb, and so I think there's a difference when your non-ADHD spouse comes to you and approaches you in a gentle and kind and collaborative way, not critical. And they say, hey, when is a good time, do you think, to get the light bulb changed? Mm-hmm. Or is there a way I can support you in remembering to do this? Or is there a way I can potentially remind you helpfully, but not nag you about it, right? Because I don't want this to be frustrating for me. Now it's back on my list of things to do to remind you to do something.
Right, yeah. And see, I have a problem with that. Like, we're grown. That's very kind that our non-ADHD spouses, well, first of all, they probably have felt like that they have had to do that. And so they probably have developed a dynamic where I need to remind you to do this thing. But ADHD people, hear me. It is not your spouse's responsibility to remind you to take care of your responsibilities. Mm. That is putting extra weight on your spouse, and that puts strain on the relationship. You figure out how to hack things. You got to figure out how to hack these things too. And I'll tell you a story. Years ago, so in the town that I live in, the power bill it's weird. I don't know how they do it. It's not, one of these big companies that you get the bill on such and such day and it's due on this day and it's the same every month. The town that I live in just sends you a bill randomly and it has a random date on it, and you might get a bill 10 days apart from each other that have two different dates on it, and you might get emailed the bill and it was supposed to have been paid yesterday. And so this does not work well for my brain. Like, auto pay is great, but I don't, it's a small town sort of system, and so I can't really auto pay this. And so I have saved, they will call you the day before they cut your power off. And I've saved their phone number in my phone with big stop sign alerts beside it, so that when they call me, I know I didn't pay my power bill and they're going to turn it off. Because years ago, actually before I got diagnosed with ADHD, and part of the reason that I went to get the diagnosis was because I forgot to pay the power bill, and we came home in the middle of the summer and the dogs were in the house boiling hot because the air had been cut off all day. And it was after 5 o'clock, so we had to load them up and take them to a hotel and sleep in a hotel and like smuggle 3 giant dogs. I mean, we had a bloodhound and a boxer at the time. Like, they were all way bigger than Ruby. Smuggling these dogs into this hotel they're not supposed to be in. Like a trench coat with a hat. Definitely. MacGyver. No. What's that dog's name? The investigator dog? No, he's from the 80s. She wouldn't know that.
Me neither, honestly.
I'll find a picture of the dog. No, now I have to Google it. ADHD symptom alert. There's something in my brain making it itch, and I cannot. Yes!
It appears Faith did, in fact, recall the 1980s to a greater degree than she had initially let on to investigators. Perhaps she had not been entirely forthcoming.
It might be McGuff. Dog. Anyway, yes, McGruff.
McGruff.
The crime dog. No?
Smuggled him into the hotel.
No recollection of this. Anyway, yeah, so we smuggled him into the hotel. McGruff, the crime dog. I'll send this to you. Also, tip from Dr. P. If you're thinking of doing something, do it immediately, or you shall forget. Like, pay the power bill. Anyway, so we smuggled the dogs into the hotel, and and then I was like, okay, something has to be done. And it's not my husband's responsibility to ask me, did you get the power bill? Or just let me take over, right? Like,
Right.
no, we have divided labor. The power bill is my responsibility. So I have to make sure this doesn't ever happen again.
See, but I like your approach to that because I think there's a big difference too when your partner approaches you about something and they're like, hey, this kind of fell through the cracks. I just wanted to touch base with you. You know, there's a difference between that partner becoming defensive and sounding dismissive and like, okay, I heard you the first 80 times. Like, or why can't you just do it? I'm busy. Or, you know, what, you just want everything done like on your timetable. Nothing's ever good enough for you. You know, I don't know, maybe something like that.
Sounds very familiar. I hear lots of people complain of these things. Yeah.
You know, so there's a difference, I think, between that defensive, you know, piece coming up versus you're right. Thanks for bringing that up. This is the hack I'm going to use, or this is what I'm going to do to try to get this done. Let me do this right before dinner, you know, or whatever, and communicating your intention with that and showing, yeah, it is a priority. I dropped the ball, but I am going to take care of it. You can trust me. You can rely on me. And I think those are things that get triggered with the non-ADHD partner because they're like, I can't count on you. I can't trust you. I can't rely on you. It's frustrating and stressful and quadruples the responsibilities that I end up taking on.
Yeah, and I think it's important also for the ADHD partner not to jump immediately into that defensiveness, like you're saying, because that just intensifies the conflict. Like, did you forget to pay the power bill? The answer is yes or no. You know, I don't need to hear a whole story about why it happened or you know, oh, it wasn't my fault, or I sent the money. Like, you didn't send the money or it wouldn't have got cut off. Like, we don't need to, you know, do that. It makes me think of when I used to do play therapy. One of the tips that they gave us for dealing with children was don't ask a child a question that you already know the answer to. So let's say we walk into a room and the kid has a crayon in their hand and they've colored all over the wall. You don't ask the kid, did you color on the wall? You know they freaking colored on the wall. But the kid's thinking, well, if they don't know, I'm not going to tell them.
Yeah.
So then it gives them the opportunity to lie so that they don't have to face a consequence. And so then we're in this like, well, I know it happened. I know you did it, you know, and why did you lie about? Well, because why wouldn't I? I'm a child trying to avoid consequences. You know, and so like, don't ask a question that you know the answer to. If you know the power bill didn't get paid or the power is off, you know, maybe you say, did you forget to pay the power bill? That's not the good way to do it. Maybe you say, the power's off. What's happening? You know, because sometimes the power's off and it's not your fault.
Just play dumb. Don't ask.
Sometimes the power's off and like they're working on something down the road.
That's true. It's not my fault.
But also, if the power's off and your spouse asks, did you pay the power bill? Recognize that we've already had an instance where they couldn't trust you on this thing. So also don't get defensive about it. Be like, yeah, I double checked that I paid it because I was concerned about the same thing. They must be working on something down the road. I didn't get an alert from the power company or whatever it is. You know?
I like that. Don't be defensive and don't feel ashamed, you know, if you forgot or you dropped the ball. And I think as the non-ADHD spouse, you can really help with that and support that by not being condescending or accusatory or attacking or aggressive about something, especially if you're frustrated. Like, that's for you to manage and not dump that on your partner. That doesn't help anything. And so I think the approach, you know, as well as the ADHD spouse not becoming defensive and reactive, the approach of the non-ADHD spouse to check in with them, I think is crucial. So both players have a role there. And I think being neurotypical, if you will, and I'm not a super huge fan of that term, so okay. I kind of use something else, being a normie, if you will, you know, it can come off like, well, I act like the majority, so the way I approach things and do things is the right way. And that's just not true. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses, and this is a team. It's not a competition. It's not I'm right, you're wrong. It's not I'm doing it right and you're doing it wrong, I'm better, you're not. So I think that's a great point to like not be defensive and then also not be accusatory and trigger that defensiveness if you can help it.
Yeah. And, you know, what you're saying about we do things different ways. The example that comes to mind for me is the way that my husband washes dishes versus the way that I wash dishes.
Oh, the dishes.
And, you know, we don't have a dishwasher. We have human dishwashers in our house. And so, his preference is to fill the sink up and he puts in these types of dishes first, and then these types of dishes, and then these types of dishes. For me, having my fingers get wrinkled triggers sensory stuff for me. I do not want, I get mad if my shower takes too long and my fingers start wrinkling. If I get in the pool or the ocean or anything, I'm only in there long enough to where it starts to wrinkle and then I'm out. I got to dry out. I don't like the wrinkly. And so when I wash dishes, I probably, forgive me for wasting water and not being environmentally efficient. But yeah, I just turn the hot water on and I scrub a dish and I rinse it off and the hot water runs the whole time. And I just wash until, the rack is filled and then I'm done. My producer says I do the same thing. I don't want to stick my hands in dirty water. Yeah. I don't want my fingers to get wrinkly.
You could get some gloves.
And that's... Oh, God, the mushy food. Nope.
Trigger warning.
And she says, get some gloves. Get some gloves. The gloves make my hands sweat, and then they get wrinkly anyway.
Okay.
And
see,
the texture
this is a
of the
perfect
gloves.
example because I knew better than to give her a supposed solution, but I did it on purpose because that's what it can look like with couples, right? Where they try to fix you. That's what it could probably feel like. Like you're trying to fix me, or just because you're not like this doesn't mean that I'm wrong in the way that I am. Yeah. So you describing that, I don't personally relate to that. I don't have that same trigger, that same activation or overstimulation in the same way. But hearing about it, I can be curious and understand what you're saying. And so how do we work with it, right? Yeah. Not against it. Yeah. So I like... So my gloves aren't going to fix things.
Right. My husband says you pay the water bill. So if that's the way you want to do it, okay. Right. Yeah. So you can't hear our producer back there sharing her wisdom, but she says in her house that her dad just kind of disappears while her mom is doing something, because it's like, if you don't see how it's getting done, maybe you don't have the urge to interfere and say, you could do it this way. That would be so much better. Or why are you doing it that way? Right. Like, just don't watch it happen. The ultimate goal is that the dishes are washed. I don't care how he washes the dishes as long as they're clean, and so he doesn't care how I wash the dishes. I'm paying the water bill. And so if I want to waste 87 gallons not getting my fingers wrinkly, then that's what we're going to do.
Marry rich.
Or monetize your podcast. Okay, so let's talk about how procrastination impacts couples and the dynamic, because I can definitely see making a proclamation, I am going to take care of this thing, and either I forget or this thing just sounds like the most awful thing. Like, I cannot change the light bulb or I might die, and so I'll do it later. But then later never comes.
Later never comes.
Yeah, and then this causes the fight, right? So is that a communication thing where you're talking about earlier? Do we need to, communicate about when can you commit to doing this thing that we both need done? Or is there I don't know. Is there like a couple dynamic that needs to happen around that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it can be really frustrating. Some people will realize a task needs to be done, take the initiative, and execute it quickly. Other people are in a different timeline.
Now or not now. That's
now
an
or never.
ADHD timeline. Either this is happening now or it's not now, and I don't need to think about it.
Right. So I think, all the tenets we've mentioned before, I think would apply nicely to this as well. Like, let's communicate. Let's manage expectations. Let's, solution focus and resolve things as a team if we can, right? So let's say changing the light bulb is just going to make you lose your mind. So then if your partner asks you to do it and you have a sensory issue or something going on that's going to create this intensity around completing this project, then communicate that right with your partner and say, okay, this aspect A, B, and C really bother me about this. How would you feel about, let's hire someone to come in and do it? And in place of that, I will take care of these other tasks, or something like that, right?
Or I'll take something from you. You take this because it doesn't bother your sensory stuff.
Exactly.
I don't know that maybe the light bulb wouldn't bother a sensory thing, but some people don't want to get on a ladder, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but that would be something with the dishes. If you just cannot, I don't know if the food or whatever. If you're having that many triggers around a chore, first of all, let me also say, please go to therapy because chores should not be triggering you that much. There are ways for you to reduce your level of distress. Okay. I don't want to encourage anybody to say, oh, I get so sensorily overwhelmed by touching squishy food that I can never do this chore. Well, if you live independently, you're going to have to do this chore. If you live somewhere where you're cooperative, you're probably going to have to do the chore. And so we also need to desensitize and not just be like, oh, I can never do that. But if you're in a relationship where, hey, can we trade this, right? Like I know you asked me to do this. I would like to be able to do this for you, but whatever is getting in the way of that,
right.
Let me take something off of your plate, and can you take care of that?
And I love that communication. And it can just be a friendly negotiation of approaching these things as a team and getting them done. It doesn't need to be a specific way, the right way. It doesn't need to be one partner specific timeline per se. Some things are time sensitive, but not everything is. And so I think non-ADHD spouses can embrace flexibility and try to have a little more soft lines around things when possible. Then the ADHD spouse doesn't feel boxed in and it's going to be so easy for me to fail and then become avoidant. Right. And so that creates another level of irritation and dysfunction, whereas it's not getting done. And now we're irritated with each other on top of it.
Right. Yeah. And there are also a lot of ADHD people who they want to have their environments well put together and organized, not a bunch of stuff on the counters or things like that, because that kind of external chaos just kind of amplifies the internal chaos. There is already a tornado happening in my brain, and stuff being on the counters or stuff being out of place, not all the time, but sometimes it's very visually overstimulating. And so my natural state is a messy person, but I have learned that being a messy person also causes me to get into some of these places of shutdown. There's too much to do, so I will avoid doing it, and then it almost looks like depression, but it's what we call depressive reactivity, where it mimics symptoms of depression, but you're shut down. You're not doing anything. You want to sleep. You want to avoid, because there's too much to do.
Yeah.
And so I have in my house, which I think that this also could potentially be something that you hear about, maybe not in these terms specifically, but in relationships. I have what I call the hell corner. And this is the place where all of my clean clothes go to die. And it's just the corner of the bedroom. So everything else is nice and organized most of the time. And then there is this mountain of chaos that is confined to a space that is mine. And so the hell corner was quite large at one point, and we purchased another dresser to have more space for the clothes. And then I purchased more clothes. So now the hell corner is in front of the dresser. And it's there, and it's beauty. And he just chooses to ignore that corner of the room.
Smart man.
And just let me, have it. Because that's the one place where my natural state can be preserved. Yeah. But then every once in a while, I'm like, oh my God, it needs to be managed, right? And then I get into this management, get your shit together moment.
Yeah, but I like what you're saying too, though, because it's considerate of your partner. It's not just well, this is how I am, so deal with it. It's okay, well, I am like this, but I also know it can affect other people and the vibe in the house and things. So I'm going to sequester some of how I am in this corner, and it's not all over in the common areas. It's not, a pile of 18 shoes right in front of the door when you walk in, So I think there's a balance to be found where we can be accepting of our partner and the differences, and certain things are just going to be annoying. Like, that's just normal, you know, like relationship living with somebody, like they're going to do things that get on your nerve, ADHD or not. So
Yeah. Yeah.
just having tolerance for that and managing it.
Yeah, and being able to say, this thing is actually something that bothers me enough that I need you to figure out something else to do,
Yeah.
right? Like, I know that it's easy for you to leave a mess everywhere you go, but I really need you to, like you said, sequester it, like get it together. So, there is a book out there called The ADHD Effect on Marriage. And I think it's, in my opinion, probably the most well done ADHD couples book, because it talks about the experience of ADHD from different sides, right? So you have examples from the non-ADHD partner of how the ADHD in their spouse or their partner makes them feel, and then vice versa. Um, and I don't think it was necessarily in that book that I learned about this, but the cleaning mantra of put it away, don't put it down. And so, if you've got something in your hand, rather than setting it down and saying, I'll deal with this later, go ahead and put it away. If you cut something, put the scissors away, and so kind of getting into this habit too of, this is a shared space. I need to respect this like it's a shared space, and not just leave my chaos and my hell corner all over. Like you can have your hell corner. You can even have a whole room. In my family, we call those damn it rooms, okay? Where you open the door and just throw stuff in and shut the door, but it's over there. It's in its own land.
Yeah, as long as the hell stays in the corner and not hell house. Yeah. I think that's manageable.
Isn't that a horror movie called Hell House? I think so. Huh? I feel like there was a hell something. Anyway, yes. Yeah.
That's like just marriage.
Yeah. Okay, so this doesn't necessarily have to do with ADHD, but I think it will help ADHD couples too. So what is your advice on like ways to connect and make sure that we've got some healthy interactions happening? I don't know. Do you like hug for 7 seconds, or stare deeply into each other's eyes, or like if they've had a conflict, how do they now repair?
Well, those are great questions. It would take a little while for me to unpack all of them. Such great ones. But I think to kind of oversimplify it based on what we've talked about today and drill down, I think, be self-aware. The ADHD spouse understanding kind of how things are for them and how they feel about it and what works for them, what doesn't, and then being able to communicate that to their partner that may not understand or personally relate to it at all. And for the non-ADHD partner to be open and curious and become more informed about it, just like you would if your partner was had diabetes or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would want to understand kind of like, what do we do to support you? What do we stay away from? Become more informed about it, learn how you can support and give space, and be flexible and be curious. I think those are just great ways to stay connected and not move into a place of criticism or condescension or frustration. Those might be some good ideas.
Yeah, I like that. Because we did talk about in the previous episode about how, ADHD is the diabetes of the brain, right? It's a chemical transmitter problem, just like the pancreas doesn't produce insulin, and that's what creates diabetes, and so I think that that's a great analogy, example, whatever the words are, of, to be curious, right? And I think being able to, like read a book, listen to a podcast, listen to a book on Audible, look up some resources, things like that. Not sponsored, right? To be able to, do those sorts of things, so you start to get an understanding of what is happening from your partner's perspective. And I mean that on both sides, right? That the ADHD Effect on Marriage actually did a really good job for me in helping understand how a neurotypical brain would look at something, right? And then I remember one of my colleagues when she read it and she said her husband was ADHD and she said, I had no idea that his brain worked differently than mine, and that's what was creating the problems, you know. And so it really is this recognition of our brains do not work the same way. We can be looking at the same problem and see two completely different solutions, and nobody's right or wrong as long as, you know, the things get accomplished, you know. And I think at the end of the day, did we do what we had to do to manage the household, to manage the kids, to deal with all of that stuff, and we still feel like we like each other at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah, and I think give your partner the benefit of the doubt. You know, don't just so rapidly move into this place of criticism or suspicion, right? Like, you didn't do the thing because you don't care when I ask you to do things, or you're lazy, or you're irresponsible, or whatever.
Mhm.
There's just
Or
different.
you don't listen.
Right. Yeah,
I listen,
exactly.
I just can't remember it.
Yeah, I heard you. And then I heard 15 other things.
Yeah.
Got lost in the
I'm
sauce.
singing a song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's good points for sure.
Yeah. And if you feel like that they haven't listened, then get a confirmation of, hi, maybe that's where that book, was it the ADHD Effect on Marriage that talks about the learning conversation? It may be a different one, but, you know, get confirmation like, hey, I need you to take care of X, Y, and Z. You know, in the restaurants, they walk behind each other and they go, heard, right? I'm acknowledging that I heard you. Don't just sit there and not say anything. Like, respond. You know, I heard what you said. I will have it done by da 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 da. Or, I hear you. I'll need to look at my schedule. Or, I know I'm not going to be able to do that. What can I do instead? And you take care of that. Like, give some kind of acknowledgement, because that is something I might hear, but if I don't acknowledge it, how are you supposed to know that I've heard it? And then you're going to jump to, you're not listening, or you don't listen to me when I talk. Well, I do listen to you. And part of my problem too is I listen, but it takes me a long time to pull the information back up. And so I'll ask my husband, like, what are you doing Friday? You know, and he's already told me. And by the time he gets the sentence out, I already told you. I remember what he said.
You needed that prompt.
So for me, I need to like ask the question in my head, what is he doing Friday? Give myself time to find the information and then start the conversation about it rather than re-asking him the question. Because that is annoying for anybody, right? Like, nobody wants to be asked the same question over and over. So that's also where we've got to control our like verbal impulsivity and not just blurt out questions that we could find the answer to if we just took a minute. So, all right. Well, hopefully this was a helpful conversation for you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Faith
you.
Dulin, marriage and family therapist from Charlotte, North Carolina, for joining us and, you know, talking about all of the things. If you're having problems and you need a therapist and you live in North Carolina, couples, this is the place to go right here. Okay. How can people find you if they want to come work on their problems?
Yes. So, marriage therapist on Instagram. I don't know how I lucked up and got that handle.
Just straight up marriage
Yeah.
therapist. She's the OG, folks. Okay.
Harmony Psychotherapy on Facebook also. There's some shares there as well. So you can find me there or in Charlotte in the Dilworth neighborhood.
Dilworth. Nice area. All right, folks. Well, you know the drill. So let's see. I think there's a bell to subscribe somewhere. You got to like hit a thumbs up to like us. You know, that really helps the algorithm. I don't know. They say it on all of the shows. So you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook. Yes, that one too. The original one. Actually, the original one was MySpace, and we're not on MySpace. Yeah, so that's all the things. So remember, we might have ADHD, but we're queens with ADHD. Non-queens welcome too. See us next time. Bye.